The phone rang at 11:47 at night, jolting me awake from the first peaceful sleep I had gotten in weeks. Mom's voice cracked through the speaker like breaking glass. "Betsy, pack up your apartment right now. Hannah and her family are moving in tomorrow morning." My sister had sold their beautiful three-bedroom house in Phoenix to fund some ridiculous year-long freedom tour across America in an RV. 2 weeks later, their dream machine broke down catastrophically in the middle of Nebraska, leaving Derek and their two kids stranded. "You cannot say no to family," Mom demanded, her tone sharp with desperation. I sat up in bed, my heart pounding as reality crashed over me like ice water. My cramped one-bedroom apartment in Denver barely had space for my own belongings, let alone 4 additional people. Hannah had always lived in that sprawling suburban paradise with its granite countertops and walk-in closets, while I scraped together rent each month in my tiny corner of the city. Mom, slow down. What exactly happened to the RV? I rubbed my temples, already feeling the familiar headache that came with any conversation about my older sister. "The engine completely died. Some mechanics said it would cost $15,000 to fix it if they could even find the parts." Hannah is beside herself. Mom's voice wavered between anger and panic. I pulled up Hannah's Instagram on my phone while Mom continued her frantic explanation. The posts from 2 weeks ago showed gleaming photos of their brand new recreational vehicle, complete with solar panels and a full kitchen. Hannah posed in designer hiking boots next to expensive camping gear, her husband Derek looking uncomfortable in the background. Tyler, their 12-year-old son, grinned from the RV's driver's seat, while 9-year-old Madison held up a sign reading, "Adventure Family." How much did they get for the house? I asked, though something in my stomach already knew the answer would be devastating. $350,000, but Hannah says most of it went into the RV and travel preparations. Mom's explanation sounded rehearsed, like she had been practicing this conversation. My phone buzzed with another call. Dad's number flashed on the screen, and I could hear him shouting in the background of Mom's call. His voice carried that particular tone he used when he was trying to control a situation that had spiraled completely beyond his grasp. "Betsy needs to step up and help her family," he hollered. "She has that nice apartment and a good job. Hannah made one mistake, and now everyone is abandoning her." One mistake. I stared at the ceiling of my carefully maintained living space, thinking about the years I had spent building my small but stable life as a marketing coordinator. Every piece of furniture had been saved for every decoration chosen with thought and care. The idea of Hannah sweeping through like a hurricane made my chest tighten. "Where are Derek and the kids sleeping tonight?" I asked, genuinely concerned despite my growing frustration. "Some awful motel in Grand Island. Derek had to borrow money from his sister just to get them a room for 3 nights. Hannah is devastated that her own family won't help in their hour of need." The guilt trip was beginning in earnest. I could picture Hannah sitting in that motel room, probably crying dramatically, while Derek tried to figure out how they had blown through hundreds of thousands of dollars in such a short time. She had always been the golden child, the one who could do no wrong, even when everything around her fell apart. "I'll call you back in the morning," I said, ending the conversation before Mom could launch into another round of emotional manipulation. But sleep never came. I spent the rest of the night staring at Hannah's social media posts, trying to piece together how someone could liquidate an entire life for what appeared to be an extended vacation. The photos showed expensive restaurant meals, luxury camping resorts, and shopping sprees at outdoor gear stores. This was not the careful budget travel of a family trying to make their money last a full year. The moving truck arrived at 7:30 in the morning, blocking 3 parking spaces in front of my apartment complex. I watched from my window as Hannah directed 2 burly men toward my building, gesturing dramatically with perfectly manicured nails. She wore designer athleisure clothing that probably cost more than my monthly grocery budget. Derek climbed out of their rental car looking like he had aged 10 years in 2 weeks. His shoulders hunched with exhaustion as Tyler and Madison tumbled out behind him, their faces confused and disappointed. This was clearly not the adventure they had been promised. My doorbell rang precisely 15 minutes later. Surprise. Hannah swept into my apartment without invitation, her arms loaded with expensive luggage. "Kids, welcome to your new home with Aunt Betsy, the rich lady." Tyler and Madison looked around my modest living space with obvious bewilderment. Madison tugged on her father's shirt. "Daddy, where are our beds gonna go?" Derek's face flushed with embarrassment. "Hannah, we discussed this. We're only staying temporarily until we figure out our next steps." Nonsense. Hannah had already begun rearranging my coffee table, moving my carefully placed books and candles to make room for her own belongings. Family takes care of family. Betsy has plenty of space, and she makes good money in marketing. I watched in stunned silence as she continued redecorating my living room, hanging her children's artwork over my existing decorations. The level of entitlement was breathtaking even for Hannah. "Actually, I work from home most days," I said, trying to keep my voice level. "I need my space quiet for conference calls and video meetings." Hannah waved dismissively. "Oh, we'll barely be here during the day. The kids will be in school and Derek is going to find a job immediately. Right, honey?" Derek nodded miserably, clutching a folder of resumes that already looked worn from handling. "I've been applying online, but most places want local references and in-person interviews." My laptop sat open on my kitchen counter and I watched Derek's eyes linger on it with desperate hope. The realization hit me that he was expecting to use my equipment and internet connection for his job search, probably along with my address for employment applications. "Oh, Betsy, what do you usually make for breakfast?" Hannah called from my kitchen, where she was already examining the contents of my refrigerator. The children are used to a proper family meal in the morning. I had been living on coffee and toast for years, keeping my grocery budget minimal so I could save money for emergencies. The idea of feeding 4 additional people every day made my bank account balance flash before my eyes like a warning sign. Tyler plopped down on my couch and immediately reached for the television remote. "This TV is tiny," he announced. "Can we get Netflix on it?" Madison wandered into my bedroom without permission, and I heard her opening my closet doors. "Mom, why doesn't Aunt Betsy have any toys or kids' stuff?" "Because Aunt Betsy has been too busy with her career to think about what really matters in life," Hannah replied loud enough for me to hear from the living room. The moving men appeared at my door again, this time carrying boxes labeled kitchen essentials and family photos. Hannah directed them to start stacking everything in my bedroom, apparently having decided that I would be sleeping on my own couch. "Hannah, we need to talk about this arrangement," I said, trying to pull her aside. "Oh, don't be such a worrier." She patted my arm condescendingly. "Everything will work out perfectly. You'll see how wonderful it is to have a real family around instead of just sitting here alone all the time." Derek approached with an apologetic expression. "Betsy, I am so sorry about all this. I tried to tell Hannah we needed to make other arrangements, but she insisted you would want to help." The truth in his eyes was painful to see. This gentle man had been dragged along on his wife's impulsive adventure, and now he was watching their family fall apart in real time. He clearly had no more control over Hannah's decisions than I did. My phone rang again. Mom's number. I let it go to voicemail, but Hannah snatched my phone before I could stop her. "Oh, good grandma's calling to check on us," she answered with bright enthusiasm. "Yes, we're all settled in. Betsy is being so generous. The kids love their new room, and Derek is already looking for work." I felt my carefully constructed adult life crumbling around me as Hannah continued telling lies to our mother, painting a picture of happy family cooperation that existed only in her imagination. 3 days later, official-looking envelopes started arriving at my apartment addressed to Hannah Stevens. I stacked them on my kitchen counter, assuming they were forwarded mail from her old address. But when the pile grew to 7 letters, my curiosity overcame my respect for privacy. The first envelope contained an approval letter for emergency food assistance. The second held paperwork for temporary cash assistance for homeless families. Hannah had applied for welfare benefits using my address, claiming she had been thrown out of her family home with nowhere to go and no resources. My hands shook as I read through the elaborate fiction she had constructed. According to these documents, Hannah was a single mother who had been abandoned by her family after fleeing domestic violence. She had listed Derek as an ex-husband who provided no support and claimed she was staying with friends temporarily but faced imminent homelessness. "Show Hannah." I called out, finding her in my bathroom applying an expensive face mask. "What is this?" She glanced at the papers without any shame. "Oh, that. Derek's been taking forever to find work and we need help buying groceries for the kids. You don't expect us to starve, do you?" "You lied to the government. You said you were homeless and single." "Technically, we were homeless when I filled those out, and I might as well be single for all the help Derek has been lately." Hannah continued spreading the mask across her cheeks as if welfare fraud was a minor inconvenience. I pulled up her Instagram account on my phone, scrolling through posts from just days earlier. Photos of expensive dinners at trendy restaurants, designer shopping bags, and a spa day with cucumber water and luxury treatments. The timestamp showed these had been posted after she submitted the welfare applications. "Nah, Hannah, you're posting pictures of luxury vacations while collecting food stamps. Do you understand how illegal this is?" She rolled her eyes dramatically. "You're being so dramatic. Lots of people get temporary help when they're between situations. It's not like we're career welfare recipients." Derek appeared in the bathroom doorway, his face pale with shock. "Hannah, what welfare applications? You told me your sister was helping with expenses." "Oh, for heaven's sake, Derek. Betsy can't afford to feed all of us indefinitely. She barely makes enough to support herself." Hannah's voice carried that particular tone she used when she was annoyed at being questioned. Derek took the papers from my hands, reading through them with growing horror. "You listed me as an absent father. Hannah, I've been applying for jobs every single day. I've been taking care of the kids while you've been out getting your nails done." "Well, you haven't found anything yet, have you?" The cruelty in her voice made Derek step backward as if he had been slapped. I watched this man who had worked steadily for 15 years before losing his warehouse supervisor position shrink under his wife's casual dismissal of his efforts. Tyler appeared beside his father, having overheard the argument. "Mom, why are you telling people Dad doesn't take care of us? He makes us breakfast every morning and helps with homework." Hannah's mask had dried into an angry white shell around her face. "Children shouldn't listen to adult conversations. Go watch television." But Tyler stood his ground, his 12-year-old sense of justice clearly offended. "Dad reads to Madison every night. He's the one who taught me to ride my bike and helped me with my science project." "Tyler, go to your room right now." "I don't have a room here. None of us do except you." The truth in his young voice cut through Hannah's performance like a knife. We were all crowded into my small space because of her decisions, and even the children could see how unfair the situation had become. My phone buzzed with a text from my boyfriend, Jake. "Still coming to dinner Sunday? My parents are excited to meet you." I had completely forgotten about our dinner plans. How could I explain that my apartment had been invaded by my sister's family and that I was now apparently an accessory to welfare fraud? Jake worked as an accountant for a respected firm downtown. The idea of introducing him to this chaos made my stomach turn. Another text appeared. "Everything okay? You've seemed stressed this week." Hannah snatched my phone again, reading the messages over my shoulder. "Oh, you have a boyfriend. How exciting. You should invite him over for dinner. I'll cook something nice for everyone." Hannah, you don't cook. You've been ordering takeout every night and leaving the containers all over my kitchen." "I cook when I have a proper kitchen to work with." This tiny space doesn't exactly inspire culinary creativity. Derek was still staring at the welfare documents, his face growing paler by the minute. Hannah, these papers say you have no savings and no assets. What happened to the money from selling our house? The question hung in the air like a toxic cloud. Hannah's expression shifted from defensive to something approaching panic, and I realized there was still another layer to this disaster that we hadn't yet uncovered. The doorbell rang at 8:30 on Saturday morning, interrupting another tense breakfast, where Hannah criticized my choice of cereal and Derek apologized for existing. I opened the door to find an elderly woman with silver hair and determined eyes, accompanied by a tall man in a police uniform. "Are you Betsy?" the woman asked, her voice firm despite her age. "I'm Margaret Patterson. I believe your sister Hannah is staying here." My stomach dropped. "Yes, she's here. Is there a problem?" The police officer stepped forward, his badge reading Martinez. "Ma'am, this is Mrs. Patterson's grandson. She has some concerns about a financial matter involving your sister." Hannah appeared behind me, still wearing her designer pajamas at nearly 9 in the morning. Her face went completely white when she saw Mrs. Patterson. "Hannah Stevens," Mrs. Patterson said, her voice carrying decades of authority. "You remember me, don't you? Your neighbor from Phoenix." Mrs. Patterson: "What a surprise! What brings you all the way to Denver?" $30,000, dear. The $30,000 you borrowed from me for your husband's supposed medical emergency. Derek's coffee mug crashed to the floor, sending ceramic pieces skittering across my kitchen tiles. "What medical emergency, Hannah? I haven't been sick." Mrs. Patterson opened her purse and withdrew a folder of documents. "Your wife came to me 3 months ago crying about how you needed emergency surgery, but your insurance wouldn't cover it. She showed me hospital bills and everything. Said you were too proud to ask for help, but she was desperate." Officer Martinez took the papers, scanning them quickly. Mrs. Patterson brought these documents to our fraud division. The hospital bills appeared to be fabricated, and the bank records show the money was deposited into an account linked to RV purchases. Hannah's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. There must be some mistake. I would never... "The bank has security camera footage of you making the deposit," Officer Martinez continued, "and we have text messages where you told Mrs. Patterson that Derek was in intensive care." Derek slowly approached the group, his face gray with shock. "Mrs. Patterson, I am so incredibly sorry. I had no idea Hannah had taken money from you. I've been perfectly healthy. We sold our house because Hannah wanted to travel, not because of any medical bills." Tyler and Madison had crept into the living room, drawn by the commotion. They pressed against the wall, watching their mother's elaborate lies crumble in real time. "Mommy," Madison whispered, "why is the policeman here?" Hannah finally found her voice, but instead of remorse, she exploded with rage. "This is all a misunderstanding, Mrs. Patterson. You offered to help our family. You can't just take back a gift." "A gift?" Mrs. Patterson's voice rose with indignation. "Young lady, I'm 83 years old and I live on Social Security. That money was my entire savings account put aside for my own medical emergencies. You told me Derek was dying." Officer Martinez stepped between them as Hannah's face twisted with fury. "Ma'am, we're going to need you to come down to the station to answer some questions about this financial arrangement." "I'm not going anywhere. These people are harassing me in my own home." "This isn't your home, Hannah," I said quietly. "This is my apartment where you've been staying as a guest." The words seemed to snap something in Hannah's brain. She spun toward me with pure venom in her eyes. "Guest, I'm your sister. Family doesn't treat family like this." Mrs. Patterson watched this outburst with sad recognition. "Officer Martinez, I told you she was manipulative. Look how quickly she switches from victim to aggressor when she's cornered." My neighbors had begun gathering in the hallway, drawn by the shouting and police presence. Mrs. Chen from next door peered around her doorframe with curious concern. The young couple from downstairs stood openly staring at the drama unfolding in front of my apartment. Derek knelt down beside his children, his voice gentle despite his obvious distress. Tyler, Madison, why don't you go sit in Aunt Betsy's bedroom for a few minutes while the adults talk? Are we in trouble, Daddy? Tyler asked his 12-year-old intuition, picking up on the gravity of the situation. No, buddy. You and your sister haven't done anything wrong. Hannah overheard this exchange and laughed bitterly. Oh, that's rich. Derek wants to protect the children from seeing their mother treated like a criminal, but he has no problem letting strangers humiliate me. Officer Martinez had been taking notes throughout this conversation. Mrs. Stevens, the evidence is pretty clear-cut. Mrs. Patterson has documentation of the loan proof that the medical emergency was fabricated and bank records showing how the money was used. We can do this easy way or the hard way. Fine, Hannah shrieked. Everyone wants to gang up on me. Everyone wants to treat me like the villain. You know what? I'm tired of trying to hold this family together while everyone else just takes and takes. She stormed toward my bedroom, presumably to get dressed for her trip to the police station. But as she passed Derek, she spun around with one final attack. This is all your fault, Derek. If you were a real man who could provide for his family, I never would have had to ask Mrs. Patterson for help in the first place. The silence that followed was deafening. Derek stood frozen, his face reflecting years of emotional abuse finally laid bare in front of witnesses. Mrs. Patterson looked between them with growing understanding, and Officer Martinez wrote something in his notebook that I suspected wasn't just about the financial fraud. My phone buzzed with a text from Jake. Hey, still planning to come to my parents' dinner tomorrow. Mom is making her famous pot roast. I stared at the message, wondering how I could possibly explain that my life had become a crime scene in the space of a single week. 20 minutes after Hannah left for the police station, Derek collapsed onto my couch with his head in his hands. His whole body shook as Tyler and Madison hovered nearby, clearly frightened by their father's distress. Kids, can you go color in the kitchen for a little while? I suggested gently. I have some markers in the drawer by the sink. Once they were occupied, Derek looked up at me with red-rimmed eyes. Betsy, there's more. So much more that you don't know. My heart sank. What do you mean? The RV trip wasn't Hannah's first crazy idea. It wasn't even about adventure. His voice cracked as he struggled to find the words. She has a gambling problem, a really serious one. The room felt like it was spinning around me. Gambling. It started small a few years ago, casino trips with her girlfriends just for fun. Then it became weekly trips, then online poker sites. Then he gestured helplessly. I found out 6 months ago that she had blown through our entire savings account, $40,000 gone. I sank into the chair across from him, trying to process this revelation. But you sold the house for $350,000. We owed $230,000 on the mortgage. After closing costs and real estate fees, we walked away with about $90,000. Hannah convinced me that the RV trip would be a fresh start, a way to reconnect as a family and give her distance from the casinos. Derek pulled out his phone and showed me a banking app. The account balance read negative $412. She spent all of it in 3 weeks. The RV, the camping gear, the restaurants, but also, he scrolled through transaction after transaction, online gambling sites. Every single night in different campgrounds, she was on her phone placing bets until 2 or 3 in the morning. The pattern became clear as he showed me the evidence. Charges to sites called Lucky Stars Casino and Diamond Dreams Poker, mixed between purchases for camping equipment and restaurant meals. Hundreds of dollars at a time, sometimes multiple times per day. The RV breaking down wasn't bad luck, Derek continued. Hannah drove it recklessly because she was desperate to get to Las Vegas. She was planning to win back all the money she had lost. The mechanic said she had been ignoring warning lights for days. Tyler appeared in the kitchen doorway, his young face creased with worry. Dad, why are you crying? Derek quickly wiped his eyes. I'm just tired, buddy. Come here. Tyler climbed onto the couch next to his father, and Derek wrapped his arm around the boy protectively. Dad, is Mom going to jail? The question hung in the air like a dark cloud. Derek looked at me helplessly, clearly unprepared to explain the complexities of fraud charges to a 12-year-old. Your mom made some mistakes with money, Derek said carefully. The police want to talk to her about it, but that doesn't mean anything bad is going to happen to you and Madison. Are we going to live with Aunt Betsy forever? Before Derek could answer, my phone rang. Jake's number flashed on the screen, and I realized I had been avoiding his calls for days. I should take this, I said, stepping into my bedroom. Betsy, I'm worried about you. Jake's voice was gentle but concerned. You canceled our plans yesterday, and you haven't returned my calls. Is everything okay? I looked around my bedroom, which now contained boxes of Hannah's belongings stacked floor to ceiling. My own clothes had been pushed to one corner of the closet to make room for her designer wardrobe. It's complicated, I said, sinking onto my bed. My sister and her family are staying here temporarily, and there have been some unexpected problems. What kind of problems? I took a deep breath and told him everything. The welfare fraud, Mrs. Patterson, the gambling addiction, the stolen money. Jake listened without interruption until I finished. Betsy, this sounds dangerous. Financial addiction can escalate quickly, and if she's willing to defraud elderly neighbors, what else might she do? I know, but they're family, and the kids are innocent in all this. The kids, yes. But Hannah isn't your responsibility, and neither is Derek, honestly. His words stung because they echoed the thoughts I had been trying to suppress. I had worked hard to build my independent life, and now it was being destroyed by someone else's poor choices. My parents expect me to take care of everyone, I said weakly. Your parents don't live in a one-bedroom apartment with 4 extra people. They don't have to deal with police investigations and welfare fraud. Betsy, you have to protect yourself. When I returned to the living room, Derek was on his phone with someone, his voice strained. Yes, I understand the timeline. No, I don't have an attorney yet. He hung up and looked at me with exhausted eyes. That was Child Protective Services. Someone reported that our children are living in an unstable environment with parents under investigation for fraud. My blood ran cold. Who would report that? Could have been anyone. Mrs. Patterson, one of your neighbors who saw the police, someone from the welfare office. CPS wants to interview the kids tomorrow. Tyler had been listening from the kitchen. Dad, what's Child Protective Services? They're people who make sure kids are safe and being taken care of properly. Derek explained, his voice steady, despite his obvious panic. Are we safe? Tyler asked, with a directness that only children possess. Derek looked at me, then back at his son. Yes, buddy, you're safe, but we might need to make some changes about where we're living. Madison appeared beside her brother, clutching a crayon drawing of stick figures under a rainbow. I drew our family, she announced proudly, then pointed to the figures. That's Daddy, that's me, that's Tyler, and that's Mommy in timeout. The innocence of her interpretation broke something inside Derek. He pulled both children close, and I could see him making a decision that had been building for months. Kids, I need to tell you something important. Mommy has been making some bad choices with money, and that's why we had to leave our house. It's not anyone's fault except Mommy's, and it's not your job to fix it. Is Mommy sick? Madison asked with 6-year-old logic. In a way, yes. She has a sickness that makes her want to gamble with money instead of taking care of our family. But that doesn't mean she doesn't love you. Tyler processed this information with the seriousness of a much older child. Is that why she's always on her phone late at night, and why she gets angry when we ask for things? Derek nodded sadly. Yes, buddy. The gambling sickness makes people act differently than they normally would. My phone buzzed with a text from Hannah. Bail is set at $5,000. Come get me. I showed the message to Derek, who stared at it for a long moment before shaking his head. I don't have $5,000, he said quietly, and even if I did, I don't think I would use it to bail her out. The kids and I need stability more than Hannah needs rescuing from the consequences of her actions. It was the first time I had heard Derek speak with firm resolve about his wife's behavior. Something fundamental had shifted in his perspective during the conversation with Mrs. Patterson and the police. Derek, what are you going to do? He looked at Tyler and Madison, who were watching him with complete trust despite the chaos surrounding their family. I'm going to call my sister in Colorado Springs. She has a spare room and has offered to help before. Then I'm going to find a lawyer and file for emergency custody. The words hung in the air like a declaration of independence. After years of enabling Hannah's destructive behavior, Derek was finally choosing to protect his children instead of protecting his wife's feelings. Sunday morning brought my parents to Denver in their 15-year-old Buick unannounced and armed with legal documents. I watched through my window as they parked illegally in front of my building and marched toward the entrance with grim determination. Mom knocked on my door with sharp, authoritative raps. When I opened it, she brushed past me without greeting, followed by Dad carrying a manila folder thick with paperwork. Where are the children? Mom demanded, scanning my living room with disapproving eyes. Derek took them to church. I replied, which was true. He had found a Methodist congregation 6 blocks away and decided the kids needed normalcy and spiritual support. Good. We need to discuss adult matters. Dad dropped the folder on my coffee table with a heavy thud. Betsy, your mother and I have been talking to lawyers about Hannah's situation. What kind of lawyers? Mom sat down without being invited and opened the folder. Family law attorneys who specialize in guardianship cases. Hannah is going through a difficult time and she needs family support, not abandonment. I stared at the documents they had spread across my table, legal forms requesting emergency guardianship of Hannah's children, with my name listed as the proposed guardian, housing agreements, financial responsibility papers. You want me to become Tyler and Madison's legal guardian? Temporarily, Dad clarified, though his tone suggested this would be anything but temporary, until Hannah gets back on her feet and resolves this misunderstanding with the police. It's not a misunderstanding, Dad. She committed fraud. She stole $30,000 from an elderly woman. Mom waved dismissively. Mrs. Patterson is a bitter old lady who probably regrets lending money to a young family. These kinds of disputes happen all the time. The casual dismissal of Mrs. Patterson's victimization made my stomach turn. Mom Hannah lied about Derek having a medical emergency. She fabricated hospital bills. That's not a simple misunderstanding. Hannah was desperate, Dad interjected. She made some poor choices, but that doesn't make her a criminal. She's always been emotional and impulsive. Always been emotional and impulsive. The phrase perfectly captured how my parents had spent decades excusing Hannah's increasingly destructive behavior. Every broken promise, every financial crisis, every relationship she had damaged was explained away as a personality quirk rather than a pattern of harmful choices. Well, what about the gambling addiction? I asked. Derek told me she lost their entire savings account at casinos. My parents exchanged a glance that told me everything I needed to know. They already knew about the gambling. How long have you known? I pressed. Mom's composure cracked slightly. Hannah came to us for help about 8 months ago. She was in over her head and needed some temporary assistance. What kind of assistance? Dad shifted uncomfortably. We helped her pay off some credit card debt, and we may have contributed to their mortgage payments a few times when she was having a rough patch. The pieces clicked into place with sickening clarity. You've been enabling her gambling addiction for months. We've been helping our daughter through a difficult period, Mom corrected sharply. That's what families do. I walked to my kitchen and pulled out my laptop, opening my banking app while my parents watched nervously. The joint account I shared with them, opened years ago for emergency purposes, showed a series of large withdrawals over the past 6 months. Is this part of helping Hannah to... I turned the screen toward them, showing $12,000 in unauthorized transfers. Dad's face went pale. Betsy, we can explain that. You stole from me. You took my money and gave it to Hannah without asking. It wasn't stealing, Mom protested. It was a family loan. We were planning to pay you back as soon as Hannah got stabilized. With what money you just told me you've been paying her mortgage and credit card bills for months. The truth was written on their faces. They had been hemorrhaging money to support Hannah's addiction, and now they were broke too. The legal guardianship papers weren't about protecting the children. They were about transferring the financial responsibility for Hannah's mess to me. How much? I asked quietly. How much what? How much of your own money have you given Hannah? Dad opened his mouth to answer, then closed it. Mom stared at her hands, finally showing some shame. Dad, how much? We took out a second mortgage on the house, he admitted in a whisper. $40,000, and your mother cashed out her pension early. The room spun around me. My parents, who were supposed to be preparing for retirement, had mortgaged their future to fund my sister's gambling addiction, and now they were expecting me to take over the financial burden. You're broke, I said, not a question, but a statement. We're temporarily cash poor, Mom corrected. Once Hannah gets back to work and Derek finds employment, they'll be able to help us recover. Hannah doesn't work. She's never held a steady job, and Derek can't support 4 people on a warehouse worker's salary even if he finds one. Derek could make more money if he wasn't so limited in his thinking, Mom said with surprising venom. Hannah has always been the ambitious one in that relationship. The casual cruelty of that statement revealed how deeply my parents had bought into Hannah's narrative. Derek, who had worked steadily for 15 years and been a devoted father, was somehow the problem because he couldn't fund his wife's gambling habit. Where is Hannah now? I asked. Still in jail, Dad replied. We were hoping you could help with the bail money. You want me to pay $5,000 to bail out someone who stole from me, committed welfare fraud, and defrauded an elderly woman? She's your sister, Mom said, as if that explained everything. She's also a criminal. The words hung in the air like a slap. My parents stared at me with expressions of shock and disappointment, as if I had betrayed some fundamental family loyalty by stating an obvious truth. Betsy Elizabeth Thompson. Mom said with the full name authority she had used when I was a child. I raised you better than this. Family takes care of family no matter what. Even when family members are harmful, even when helping them hurts innocent people like Mrs. Patterson and Derek and the kids. Those people will be fine, Dad said dismissively. Mrs. Patterson probably has insurance or something, and Derek knew what he was getting into when he married Hannah. The casual dismissal of other people's suffering was breathtaking. In their desperation to protect Hannah from consequences, my parents had developed a worldview where everyone else's pain was irrelevant. Derek's key turned in the lock, and he entered with Tyler and Madison, both dressed in their Sunday clothes and carrying church bulletins. They stopped short when they saw my parents' confusion clear on their young faces. Grandma, Grandpa. Madison ran toward them with innocent excitement. Mom scooped her up with genuine affection, and for a moment her face softened with grandmotherly love. Hello, sweetheart. How are you doing? We went to church and the pastor said God helps people who help themselves, Madison announced proudly. Dad chuckled, but I caught the irony in Madison's innocent statement. God helps people who help themselves, not people who enable others' self-destruction. Tyler approached more cautiously, his 12-year-old intuition picking up on the tension in the room. Are you here to take us home? The question broke Derek's heart visibly. Buddy, we don't have a home to go back to right now, remember? But Grandma and Grandpa have a house, Tyler said with child logic. My parents exchanged another meaningful glance, and I realized they had probably discussed exactly that possibility. Actually, kids, Mom said carefully, Grandma and Grandpa are getting a little old to take care of children full-time, but Aunt Betsy has offered to let you stay here as long as you need. I had offered no such thing, but before I could correct this lie, Derek stepped forward. Actually, we have some news, he said, his voice stronger than I had heard it in days. My sister Karen has invited us to stay with her family in Colorado Springs. She has a big house and 3 kids of her own. Tyler and Madison will have cousins to play with. Tyler's face lit up with the first genuine smile I had seen from him since their arrival. Really, we're gonna live with Aunt Karen. For a while, yes, until Daddy finds a good job and we can get our own place again. Mom's face darkened with displeasure. Derek, that seems very sudden. Don't you think the children need stability rather than being moved around from place to place? They need stability, Derek agreed. That's exactly why we're leaving Denver. My sister can provide a stable home environment while I get back on my feet. The implication was clear. My apartment was not a stable environment, and Derek was removing his children from the chaos that surrounded Hannah. What about Hannah? Dad asked. She'll be devastated if her children are taken away while she's dealing with legal troubles. Derek's expression hardened. Hannah should have thought about that before she spent our children's college funds at casinos. The statement was delivered with quiet finality, and I realized Derek had been having his own conversation with reality over the past few days. The gentle, apologetic man who had arrived at my apartment was transforming into a protective father who would prioritize his children's welfare over his wife's feelings. That evening, after Derek had taken the kids to McDonald's to give them a break from adult conversations, I sat down with my laptop and began investigating the unauthorized transfers from my bank account. What I found made me physically sick. The first transfer had occurred 8 months earlier, just 3 days after I had given Mom my updated banking information for emergency purposes. $500 with a memo reading, "Family emergency, Hannah." Then another $500 2 weeks later. Then larger amounts, $1,000, $1,500, $2,000. But it was the timing that revealed the true scope of the betrayal. The transfers coincided perfectly with Hannah's social media posts from various casinos. A $1,500 withdrawal on the same day, Hannah posted pictures from Ladies' Night at Thunder Valley Casino. A $2,000 transfer that matched the weekend she had tagged herself at Lucky Star Gaming Resort. My parents hadn't just been enabling Hannah's gambling. They had been using my money to fund her casino trips. I called the bank's fraud hotline and spoke with a representative named Jennifer, who walked me through the account activity with professional concern. "Ew, Ms. Thompson, these transactions show a clear pattern of unauthorized access," Jennifer explained. "The account holders listed on your emergency contact information have been making withdrawals without your knowledge or consent." "Is this considered theft?" "Legally, it depends on the account agreement you signed. But morally and practically, yes, someone has been stealing your money." Jennifer helped me file a formal fraud complaint and freeze the joint account. She also suggested I change all my other account passwords and review my credit report for any other suspicious activity. "Unfortunately, family financial abuse is more common than people realize," she said sympathetically. "Adult children often discover that their parents or siblings have been accessing their accounts for months or years." After hanging up, I pulled my credit report and discovered something even more disturbing. 3 credit cards had been opened in my name over the past 4 months. Cards I had never applied for with balances totaling nearly $15,000. The applications had been submitted online using my personal information, but with Hannah's email address and my parents' address. Someone had been systematically stealing my identity while living under my roof and eating my food. My phone rang, Mom's number. "Betsy, we need to talk about Derek's announcement today. Taking those children away from their mother during a crisis is cruel and unnecessary." "Mom, did you know that Hannah has been opening credit cards in my name?" Silence. "Mom? I don't know anything about credit cards." "3 cards, Mom. $15,000 in debt that I never authorized. All linked to Hannah's email address." More silence, then a sigh. "Hannah mentioned that she had helped you apply for some cards to build your credit. She said you asked her to handle the paperwork because you were too busy with work." The gaslighting was so smooth, so practiced, that I could tell this wasn't the first time my parents had been fed this story. I never asked Hannah to apply for credit cards in my name. This is identity theft, Mom. It's a federal crime. You're being very dramatic, Betsy. Hannah was trying to help you, and now you're talking about pressing charges against your own sister. I'm talking about protecting myself from someone who has been systematically stealing from me. She borrowed some money during a difficult time. Families help each other. Borrowing requires asking permission. This is theft. Dad's voice came on the line. Apparently, I was on speakerphone. Betsy, you're letting this situation get out of hand. Hannah made some mistakes, but destroying the family over money is exactly the kind of selfish behavior we raised you not to exhibit. Selfish behavior. After months of having my money stolen to fund someone else's gambling addiction, I was being accused of selfishness for wanting it to stop. How much of this did you know? I asked directly. How much of what? How much did you know about Hannah stealing my money and using my identity for credit cards? Another pause. Then Dad said something that shattered my remaining faith in my parents' integrity. We knew Hannah was resourceful in finding ways to get temporary financial help. We didn't ask for details because we trusted her to handle things appropriately. They had known all along that Hannah was committing fraud, and they had chosen to look the other way because it benefited them too. The money Hannah stole from me had been used to pay their bills, as well as fund her gambling. I'm filing a police report tomorrow, I said quietly. You absolutely will not, Mom snapped. I forbid you to involve the police in family business. You forbid me, Mom. I'm 28 years old and someone has been stealing my money for months. This isn't family business, it's criminal business. If you file charges against Hannah, you're dead to us, Dad said with cold finality. We will not have a daughter who destroys her own family. The ultimatum hung in the air like poison gas. Choose Hannah or lose your parents forever. Then I guess you'll have one less daughter, I replied and hung up. My hands shook as I set the phone down. In the space of one conversation, I had lost not just my sister, but my parents as well. The family I had been trying so hard to preserve had revealed itself to be built on lies, theft, and emotional manipulation. Derek returned with Tyler and Madison an hour later, both children carrying Happy Meal toys and wearing chocolate ice cream smiles. The contrast between their innocent happiness and the toxic family dynamics swirling around them was heartbreaking. Aunt Betsy, look what I got. Madison held up a small plastic toy, her face glowing with simple pleasure. That's wonderful, sweetie, I managed, trying to keep the devastation out of my voice. Derek took one look at my expression and ushered the children toward the bathroom to wash their hands. When he returned, he sat down beside me with gentle concern. What happened? I told him about the credit cards, the bank fraud, and my parents' ultimatum. Derek listened without interruption, his own face growing pale as the full scope of the betrayal became clear. Betsy, I am so sorry. I had no idea Hannah had involved you financially. It's not your fault, Derek. You're as much a victim in this as I am. When we get to Colorado Springs, I'm going to help you in any way I can. Testimony, documentation, whatever you need to prove what she did. His offer of support meant everything, especially coming from someone who was losing his own wife and marriage to Hannah's destructive choices. Are you really going to divorce her? I asked. Derek looked toward the bathroom where his children were brushing their teeth and giggling together. I have to. Hannah isn't just gambling away our money anymore. She's stealing from family, lying to government agencies, and teaching our children that manipulation and fraud are acceptable ways to solve problems. The kids love her. They love the mother. They think she is not the mother she actually is. And if I don't protect them from her influence now, they're going to grow up thinking this kind of behavior is normal. Derek's transformation from enabling spouse to protective parent was remarkable to witness. Hannah's arrest had finally given him permission to acknowledge what he had probably known for months. His wife was not just making poor choices, but was actively harming everyone around her. When are you leaving for Colorado Springs? Tomorrow morning, if that's okay with you. Karen is expecting us, and the kids are excited about meeting their cousins. I nodded, though the thought of losing Tyler and Madison's innocent presence made my apartment feel even emptier. They had been the only bright spots in this entire disaster. Will you be okay here by yourself? Derek asked with genuine concern. I looked around my small apartment, which would soon return to its normal, quiet state. For the first time in weeks, I would be able to work without interruption, sleep in my own bed, and eat meals without criticism. I think I will be, I said and realized I meant it. Hannah was released on bail Tuesday morning, though neither Derek nor my parents had provided the money. According to Officer Martinez, who called to inform me, an organization that helps women in legal trouble had posted her bond as part of their outreach program. She arrived at my apartment at 10:30, carrying a plastic bag of personal belongings and wearing the same clothes she had been arrested in 3 days earlier. Her designer confidence had been replaced by something harder and more desperate. Where is everyone? She demanded, scanning my notably empty living room. Derek took the kids to Colorado Springs yesterday. They're staying with his sister. Hannah's face contorted with rage. He took my children without my permission. You were in jail, Hannah. Someone had to make decisions about where Tyler and Madison would live. I have rights. He can't just kidnap my kids because I had some legal troubles. She pulled out her phone and began dialing frantically. Derek, you answer this phone right now. Where are my children? I could hear Derek's calm voice through the speaker, though I couldn't make out his words. Hannah's responses grew increasingly shrill. You had no right to take them anywhere. Bring them back to Denver immediately. A pause, then. I don't care what your sister thinks. Those are my children. She hung up and spun toward me with fury blazing in her eyes. This is all your fault. If you had been supportive instead of calling the police, none of this would have happened. I didn't call the police, Hannah. Mrs. Patterson did because you stole $30,000 from her. I didn't steal anything. She gave me that money. For Derek's fake medical emergency, you showed her fabricated hospital bills. Hannah waved dismissively as if the details of her fraud were irrelevant. She's a lonely old woman with too much money. I provided her with a purpose, something to feel good about. If anything, I did her a favor. The casual sociopathy in that statement was breathtaking. Hannah had convinced herself that defrauding an elderly woman was actually an act of kindness. Hannah, you need help, professional help. What I need is for my family to stop sabotaging me and start supporting me. She began pacing around my living room like a caged animal. Where am I supposed to sleep tonight? Derek took the kids. You're acting like I'm some kind of criminal, and Mom and Dad are tapped out financially. Maybe you should check into a treatment program for gambling addiction. I don't have a gambling addiction, she screamed. I had a run of bad luck that got out of hand. There's a difference. You lost your children's college funds at casinos. I was trying to win money to pay off our debts. If Derek had been supportive instead of constantly worrying and complaining, I could have concentrated better and made better decisions. Even now, facing criminal charges and the loss of her children, Hannah was blaming everyone else for the consequences of her own choices. Derek's worry about their family's financial security was somehow responsible for her gambling losses. Hannah, you opened credit cards in my name. I was helping you build your credit. You should be thanking me. You stole $15,000 from me. I borrowed money that I fully intended to pay back as soon as I got back on my feet. When how you don't have a job, your husband is filing for divorce, and you're facing fraud charges. Hannah stopped pacing and stared at me with calculating eyes. Derek isn't filing for divorce. He's just angry right now. Once he calms down and thinks about what's best for the children, he'll come back. The delusion in her voice was chilling. Hannah genuinely believed that Derek would eventually return to enable her behavior, just as my parents had been doing for months. Hannah, Derek told me about the gambling. He knows you've been lying about everything. Derek doesn't understand how investments work. Sometimes you have to risk money to make money. Gambling isn't investing. It is if you're smart about it. There was no reaching her. Hannah had constructed an elaborate fantasy world where her destructive behavior was actually sophisticated financial planning, where her victims were willing participants, and where her family's abandonment was temporary insanity that would soon be corrected. My phone rang, Jake's number. "Don't answer that," Hannah commanded. "It's my boyfriend." "Tell him you're busy. We need to figure out living arrangements." I answered the call while Hannah glared at me. "Hi, Jake." "Hey, how are you holding up?" I heard through a mutual friend that there was some kind of police situation at your apartment. Word was getting around about Hannah's arrest, which meant my professional reputation was probably being damaged by association. I worked in marketing for a financial services company. Having a sister arrested for fraud was not exactly career-enhancing. "It's been a difficult few days," I said carefully. "Do you want to grab dinner tonight? We could go somewhere quiet and talk." Before I could answer, Hannah snatched the phone from my hand. "Hello, Jake. This is Betsy's sister, Hannah. She can't go to dinner tonight because we're dealing with a family crisis. Maybe some other time." She hung up and handed the phone back to me with satisfaction. "There, you need to focus on family right now, not dating." The casual violation of my autonomy and privacy was stunning. Hannah had just sabotaged my relationship as casually as she had stolen my money. "You had no right to do that." "I'm protecting you from making bad decisions while you're emotionally overwrought." "Bad decisions. Jake is the most stable, honest person I know." "Exactly. And stable, honest people don't want to be dragged into family drama. He'll run the first chance he gets." I realized Hannah was projecting her own manipulative worldview onto my relationship. In her mind, everyone was constantly calculating personal advantage, and genuine support during difficult times was impossible. "Hannah, you need to leave." "Excuse me." "You need to leave my apartment tonight." Her face shifted from surprise to cold fury. "You're throwing out your own sister after everything I've been through. Everything you've put yourself through, and everyone else." "I have nowhere to go, Betsy. I'm broke. I'm facing legal charges, and my husband has kidnapped my children. You're really going to abandon me when I need help the most." "You stole from me, Hannah. You committed fraud using my identity. You've been lying to everyone for months. I can't trust you in my home." "Oh, fine." Hannah's voice rose to a shriek. "You want to be selfish? You want to throw away 28 years of sisterhood over money? Fine." She rushed toward me with such sudden violence that I stumbled backward, hitting my coffee table. Hannah's hands shoved my shoulders hard, and I fell onto the couch as she screamed in my face. "You owe me. I'm the one who made this family interesting. I'm the one who took risks while you sat here in your boring little apartment doing nothing with your life. You owe me for years of being the responsible one while I carried this family." Her fingernails scraped across my cheek as I tried to push her away, and I felt a sharp line of pain where she had scratched me. "Hannah, stop. You're nothing without me. You're nobody. You have no friends, no real life, nothing, and you're going to throw away the only family you have over money." She grabbed my phone again, apparently planning to call Derek and threaten him, but I managed to wrestle it away from her. In the struggle, Hannah lost her balance and fell against my bookshelf, sending several items crashing to the floor. The sound of breaking glass seemed to snap her out of her rage. She stared at the mess she had created, then at the scratch on my face, and for a moment, something like sanity flickered in her eyes. "Betsy, Get out!" My voice was shaking but firm. "Get out of my apartment right now or I'm calling the police." "You wouldn't call the police on your own sister." I picked up my phone and began dialing 911. "Wait." Hannah's voice shifted to panic. Okay, I'll leave, but this isn't over, Betsy. Family is family, and you can't just throw that away." She grabbed her plastic bag of belongings and headed for the door, turning back one final time. When Derek comes to his senses and brings my children home, don't expect to be part of their lives. You've made your choice." The door slammed behind her, leaving me alone in my damaged apartment with a bleeding cheek and the realization that the sister I had been trying to save was willing to physically hurt me to get what she wanted. The next morning brought a knock on my door from Officer Martinez, accompanied by a detective I hadn't met before. They showed me their badges and asked if they could come in to discuss Hannah's case. "Ms. Thompson, we've been investigating your sister's financial activities, and we've uncovered some additional crimes that affect you directly," Detective Sarah Chen explained as she settled into my living room chair. I touched the bandaged scratch on my cheek, still tender from Hannah's attack the previous evening. "What kind of additional crimes?" Officer Martinez opened a folder thick with documents. "Identity theft, credit card fraud, and bank fraud. Your sister has been using your personal information to open accounts and access funds for approximately 6 months." Detective Chen pulled out a tablet and showed me a series of credit applications bearing my forged signature. "We found these in your sister's belongings when she was processed. She had been carrying copies of your social security card, birth certificate, and other identifying documents." The scope of Hannah's planning was staggering. This wasn't impulsive behavior driven by desperation. It was a calculated fraud scheme that had been in development for months. "How much total damage are we looking at?" I asked. So far we've identified $47,000 in fraudulent debt created in your name," Detective Chen replied. "But that number may grow as we continue investigating." My savings account, my good credit, my financial stability all destroyed by someone who shared my DNA and had eaten meals at my table while plotting against me. "The good news is that we have an extremely strong case," Officer Martinez continued. "Your sister kept detailed records, apparently believing she would be able to pay everything back before anyone noticed." They showed me Hannah's notebook filled with her handwriting, documenting every fraudulent transaction, every forged application, every stolen dollar. It was like a confession written in her own hand. "We also have cooperation from several other victims," Detective Chen added. "Mrs. Patterson, of course, but also 3 other elderly individuals in Phoenix who were defrauded using similar medical emergency stories." 3 others. Your sister was busy. We found evidence of a systematic fraud operation targeting senior citizens in her neighborhood. Mrs. Patterson was just the most recent victim. The image of my sister as an impulsive gambling addict was being replaced by something much darker, a calculated predator who targeted vulnerable elderly people for financial scams. "There's something else," Officer Martinez said carefully. "We need to discuss your parents' involvement." My stomach dropped. "What about my parents?" Detective Chen consulted her notes. "Our financial investigation shows that your parents received money directly from some of these fraudulent accounts. They may face charges as accessories after the fact." "They didn't know the money was stolen." "Are you certain about that?" I thought about my parents' evasive answers, their willingness to look the other way, their knowledge of Hannah's resourcefulness in finding financial help. Had they really been ignorant victims or willing participants who chose not to ask uncomfortable questions? "Ms. Thompson, we'd like you to testify before a grand jury about your sister's crimes," Detective Chen said. "Your testimony would be crucial in securing convictions on the identity theft and fraud charges." "What would that involve?" "You would tell the grand jury about the unauthorized use of your accounts, the credit cards opened in your name, and any other fraudulent activity you're aware of. The process is confidential, and we would prepare you thoroughly beforehand." Officer Martinez leaned forward. "I want you to understand that your testimony could result in significant prison time for your sister. Identity theft and financial fraud are federal crimes with mandatory minimum sentences." "How much time?" "With the number of victims and the amount of money involved, she could face 15 to 20 years. The number hit me like a physical blow. Hannah could spend the next 2 decades in federal prison missing Tyler and Madison's entire childhood and adolescence. But then I thought about Mrs. Patterson's life savings, about the other elderly victims, about Derek's devastated faith in marriage, about 2 innocent children who had been taught that fraud and manipulation were acceptable family values. She hurt a lot of people, I said quietly. Yes, she did, Detective Chen agreed. And if we don't stop her now, she'll hurt more people. Criminals like your sister don't stop on their own. They just get better at hiding their crimes. I thought about Hannah's complete lack of remorse, her willingness to blame everyone else for her choices, her physical violence when confronted with consequences. Detective Chen was right. Hannah would not stop unless she was forced to stop. I'll testify, I said. Officer Martinez nodded with approval. We'll be in touch about scheduling. In the meantime, we recommend you continue documenting any contact your sister attempts to make. If she threatens you or tries to persuade you not to cooperate, that could result in additional charges. After they left, I sat in my quiet apartment and tried to process the magnitude of what I had just agreed to do. I was going to testify against my own sister in a way that would likely send her to prison for decades. My phone buzzed with a text from Derek. Kids are doing great. Karen's family is wonderful. Tyler made the soccer team at his new school. Thank you for everything, Betsy. We're finally safe. Attached was a photo of Tyler and Madison playing in a backyard with 3 other children, all of them laughing and covered in grass stains. Tyler looked relaxed and happy in a way I hadn't seen since their arrival in Denver. Madison was holding hands with a little girl about her age, both of them grinning at the camera. They looked like normal children again, instead of stress casualties from their mother's war against reality. My phone rang, Jake's number. Betsy, I'm worried about you. That was strange yesterday when your sister answered your phone. Jake, I owe you an enormous apology and an explanation. Why don't I come over? We can talk in person. For the first time in weeks, I looked around my apartment and realized it was actually ready for visitors. Hannah's belongings were gone, the chaos had been cleaned up, and my space belonged to me again. I'd like that, I said and meant it. When Jake arrived an hour later, I told him everything. The gambling addiction, the fraud charges, the identity theft, my parents' ultimatum, Hannah's physical attack. He listened without judgment, occasionally asking clarifying questions, but mostly just being present for my story. Betsy, I'm so sorry you've been dealing with this alone, he said when I finished. Why didn't you tell me sooner? I was embarrassed, and I thought I could fix it somehow, keep the family together. You can't fix other people's choices, and you can't save someone who doesn't want to be saved. Jake's words echoed what Derek had realized about Hannah. Some people have to hit rock bottom before they're willing to change, and some people choose to blame the ground instead of examining their own destructive behavior. Are you okay with dating someone whose sister is probably going to federal prison? Jake took my hands in his, looking directly into my eyes. I'm dating you, not your sister. Your character and choices are what matter to me, and everything you've told me shows incredible strength and integrity. For the first time since this entire crisis began, I felt like I wasn't facing it alone. Hannah had been wrong about Jake running away at the first sign of family drama. Real love apparently meant staying present during the difficult times instead of disappearing when life got complicated. What happens next? Jake asked. I testify against Hannah, help rebuild my credit, and try to figure out how to have a relationship with my parents who chose to enable her instead of protect me. And in the meantime, I remember what it feels like to have my own life back. Jake smiled and pulled me into a hug that felt like safety and hope and the possibility that family could mean support instead of manipulation. I'm proud of you for standing up for yourself, he whispered into my hair. It doesn't feel brave, it feels necessary. Sometimes those are the same thing. 2 weeks later, Officer Martinez called with news that would transform Hannah's case from a family dispute into a federal investigation. The FBI's Financial Crimes Task Force had taken over, and what they discovered made my stomach turn. "Ms. Thompson, we need you to come to the federal building downtown," Agent Rebecca Walsh explained when I met her the following morning. "Your sister's activities were far more extensive than we initially realized." Agent Walsh led me through a maze of cubicles to a conference room where the walls were covered with charts, photographs, and financial documents. At the center of it all was a timeline of Hannah's crimes stretching back 3 years. "We've identified 27 victims across 4 states." Agent Walsh began pointing to a map dotted with red pins. "Your sister wasn't just gambling compulsively. She was running a sophisticated fraud operation targeting elderly individuals and family members." The evidence was overwhelming. Hannah had been using social media to identify vulnerable elderly people, then approaching them with elaborate stories about family medical emergencies. Mrs. Patterson was just one of many seniors who had been manipulated out of their savings. "The pattern is always the same," Agent Walsh explained. "Hannah would befriend elderly neighbors or acquaintances, learn about their family situations and financial resources, then create a crisis that required immediate cash assistance." She showed me printed screenshots of Hannah's social media activity. Posts about visiting with sweet Mrs. Johnson from church, followed days later by bank deposits matching suspicious cash withdrawals from Mrs. Johnson's account. Photos tagged at senior community centers preceded by weeks, a series of emergency loans from residents. "How much money total?" I asked, though I dreaded the answer. "Over $400,000 across all victims. Your sister was operating what amounts to a criminal enterprise." Agent Walsh pulled out another folder containing documents that made my blood run cold. Identity theft cases involving not just me, but Derek Tyler Madison and even my parents. Hannah had been using her entire family's personal information to open fraudulent accounts. "She applied for credit cards in your nephew's name. He's 12 years old." The violation was so profound that I couldn't speak for several minutes. Hannah had been willing to destroy her own son's financial future before he was old enough to understand what credit meant. "There's more," Agent Walsh continued. "We found evidence that your sister had been planning to flee the country. She had researched non-extradition countries and had been converting stolen funds into cryptocurrency." She showed me Hannah's internet search history recovered from her phone. Searches for countries without extradition treaties, how to disappear completely, and living off the grid internationally. Mixed between these were continued searches for online gambling sites and get-rich-quick investment schemes. Was she planning to take Tyler and Madison with her? We don't think so. Her research focused on single-person travel and establishing new identities for one individual. She appears to have been planning to abandon her family entirely. The cruelty of that revelation was staggering. Hannah hadn't just been stealing from her children's future, she had been planning to disappear from their lives forever, rather than face the consequences of her actions. Agent Walsh opened another file. "We'd like your help with a controlled operation." "What kind of operation?" "Your sister has been trying to contact you, correct?" I nodded. Hannah had been calling and texting constantly since her release on bail, alternating between tearful apologies and angry demands that I recant my statement to police. "We'd like you to arrange a meeting with her. She's been careful about electronic communication since her arrest, but she might reveal additional crimes or co-conspirators if she believes she can convince you to help her." The thought of seeing Hannah again made my skin crawl, but I understood the importance of gathering more evidence. What would I have to do? Wear a recording device and meet with her in a public place. Ask her about the money, about other victims, about her plans. Let her talk and try to get her to admit to crimes we haven't been able to prove yet. Agent Walsh explained that they suspected Hannah had been working with someone else to identify victims and launder money. Phone records showed regular contact with an unknown associate who had helped her research targets and convert stolen funds. We believe there's an organized network of elder fraud operators, and your sister may be able to provide information that leads us to the larger organization. The idea that Hannah was part of a criminal conspiracy rather than just a lone gambling addict somehow made everything worse. She hadn't stumbled into crime through weakness. She had actively sought out criminal partners and developed expertise in financial fraud. Will this help the victims get their money back? This is some of it. We've frozen several accounts and identified assets that can be recovered. But unfortunately, most of the stolen money was gambled away or spent. The best we can hope for is restitution over time and preventing future victims. Agent Walsh handed me a business card with her direct number. Think about the controlled meeting and let me know. Your cooperation could make the difference between stopping a single criminal and dismantling an entire fraud network. After leaving the federal building, I drove to a small park near my apartment and called Derek. He deserved to know that Hannah's crimes extended far beyond what we had initially discovered. "Oh, Jesus, Betsy," Derek breathed when I finished explaining the FBI's findings. She was going to steal Tyler and Madison's identities. She already had. Tyler has a credit card in his name with a $3,000 balance. Derek was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was thick with emotion. I feel like I failed to protect them. I should have seen what she was doing. Derek, you couldn't have known. She was hiding this from everyone. The signs were there, though. The secretive phone calls, the sudden mood swings, the way she would disappear for hours, claiming she was running errands. I chose to believe her explanations because it was easier than confronting the truth. I understood that guilt intimately. We had all chosen to enable Hannah's lies at various points because acknowledging her destructive behavior would have required difficult conversations and painful choices. "The kids are okay now," I reminded him. "That's what matters." Tyler asked me yesterday if his mom was a bad person. How do I answer that question? The weight of that conversation was heartbreaking to imagine. How do you explain to a child that their mother is not just flawed or struggling, but actively criminal? What did you tell him? I said that his mom is sick in a way that makes her hurt people, including people she loves, and that it's not his fault or his responsibility to fix her. Derek's approach was wise and age-appropriate. Tyler needed to understand that Hannah's behavior was abnormal without being burdened with guilt about loving her despite her crimes. "The FBI wants me to meet with Hannah and wear a recording device," I told him. "That sounds dangerous." "It would be in a public place with agents nearby, but I wanted to ask you something first. Would your testimony help build a stronger case against her?" Derek was quiet again, and I could almost hear him wrestling with the decision. Testifying against Hannah would mean publicly acknowledging years of emotional and financial abuse, admitting that he had failed to protect his children from their mother's criminal behavior. "If it helps other victims, yes, I'll testify." "Derek, are you sure?" "Betsy, I've been reading about elder abuse since we got to Colorado Springs. Do you know what the average loss is for seniors who get targeted by fraud? It's not just money. It's their sense of safety, their ability to trust other people, their independence. Some of these elderly victims never recover psychologically." He was right. Mrs. Patterson had been more than financially damaged by Hannah's theft. Her faith in other people, her willingness to help neighbors in need, her confidence in her own judgment had all been shattered by Hannah's manipulation. Why, Hannah needs to face consequences not just for what she did to our family, but for what she did to vulnerable people who trusted her. Derek continued, "And I need to model for Tyler and Madison that protecting innocent people is more important than protecting family members who choose to be harmful." Derek's transformation from enabler to protector was complete. The gentle man who had arrived at my apartment making excuses for his wife had become a father willing to testify against her in federal court to protect other families from experiencing what his own had endured. I'll do the controlled meeting, I decided. But I want you to know that no matter what Hannah says or claims, you and the kids will always be family to me. Betsy, you saved us. You were the first person to say no to Hannah's manipulation, and that gave me permission to protect my children instead of protecting her feelings. After we hung up, I sat in my car and thought about the ripple effects of saying no to family manipulation. By refusing to enable Hannah's destructive behavior, I had inadvertently given Derek the courage to make the same choice. Together, we had broken a cycle of abuse that might have continued for years. Agent Walsh had been right about one thing. Stopping Hannah wasn't just about punishing past crimes, but about preventing future victims. Elder fraud was a growing epidemic, and criminals like Hannah counted on family loyalty and social shame to protect them from consequences. I called Agent Walsh's number. "I'll do the meeting," I said. "When do we start?" The controlled meeting with Hannah was scheduled for the following Saturday at a busy coffee shop downtown. I wore the recording device Agent Walsh had given me, a tiny microphone clipped inside my jacket that would capture everything Hannah said. Hannah arrived 20 minutes late, looking haggard and desperate. Her designer clothes had been replaced by bargain store items, and her normally perfect hair showed several inches of gray roots. The consequences of her crimes were finally visible in her appearance. "Betsy, thank God you agreed to meet with me," she said, sliding into the booth across from me. "I've been going crazy trying to reach you." "I've been busy dealing with the damage you caused to my credit and finances." Hannah's expression shifted to practiced remorse. "I know you're angry, and you have every right to be. I made some terrible mistakes when I was desperate and not thinking clearly." "Mistakes, Hannah. You systematically stole my identity for months. I was going to pay it all back as soon as I got my gambling under control. You have to believe me." Hannah reached across the table to take my hand, but I pulled away. The recording device was capturing every word, and I needed her to incriminate herself as thoroughly as possible. "Tell me about Mrs. Patterson," I said. "What exactly did you tell her to get $30,000? Hannah's eyes darted around the coffee shop nervously. That was a misunderstanding. I was desperate about Derek's health, and I may have exaggerated the situation." "Derek was never sick, Hannah. You showed her fabricated hospital bills." "Look, Mrs. Patterson is fine. She's got Social Security and probably insurance or whatever. She's not going to starve because she helped out a neighbor." The casual dismissal of her victim's suffering was exactly what Agent Walsh needed to hear. Hannah felt no genuine remorse for the elderly woman whose life savings she had stolen. "What about the other elderly people, Mrs. Johnson from your church, the residents at the senior center?" Hannah's face went pale. She hadn't known that the FBI had identified her other victims. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Hannah, they have bank records. They know about all of them." She was quiet for several minutes, sipping her coffee and clearly calculating how much I knew versus how much she could safely admit. "Sometimes old people want to feel useful," she finally said. "They have money sitting in accounts doing nothing, and they get excited about helping families in crisis. I gave them purpose." "You gave them purpose by lying about medical emergencies." "I gave them the opportunity to be generous. Most of them probably wrote it off their taxes anyway." Hannah's twisted logic was breathtaking. She had convinced herself that defrauding vulnerable seniors was actually a form of community service. "Hannah, did someone teach you how to identify these victims?" Her entire body tensed at the question. "What do you mean?" "The FBI thinks you were working with other people, an organized fraud ring." "That's ridiculous. I worked alone." But her defensive reaction suggested otherwise. Agent Walsh had been right about Hannah having criminal associates. "Well, who is Marcus?" I asked, using a name that had appeared frequently in Hannah's phone records. Hannah's coffee cup slipped from her hand, spilling brown liquid across the table. How do you know about Marcus? The FBI has your phone records, Hannah. Who is he? He was just someone I met online in a gambling forum. We talked about strategies and investments. What kind of strategies? Hannah grabbed napkins to clean up the spilled coffee, using the activity to avoid meeting my eyes. Investment strategies, ways to make money quickly to cover gambling debts. Like defrauding elderly people. It wasn't like that. Marcus he helped me understand how to identify people who might be willing to make loans during emergencies. Agent Walsh was going to be very interested in these admissions. Hannah had just confirmed that she had been receiving training in elder fraud techniques from an associate named Marcus. Hannah, were you planning to leave the country? Her head snapped up with genuine surprise. What, no, of course not. The FBI found internet searches on your phone. Non-extradition countries, cryptocurrency creating new identities. Hannah stared at me for a long moment, and I could see her calculating whether to continue lying or attempt a different approach. Betsy, you have to understand, I was in so deep with gambling debts that I thought I might have to disappear to protect Derek and the kids from the loan sharks. Loan sharks. I owed money to some very dangerous people, the kind of people who threaten families when they don't get paid. This was a new revelation and potentially important information for the investigation. How much did you owe? About $60,000. They were calling Derek's workplace, showing up at the kids' school. I was terrified for everyone's safety. If Hannah was telling the truth about loan sharks, it added another dimension to her crimes. She hadn't just been stealing to fund gambling, she had been stealing to avoid violent consequences from illegal lenders. Is that why you really wanted to take the RV trip, to get away from loan sharks? Partly, yes. I thought if we could just get out of Phoenix for a while, I could figure out a solution without putting the kids in danger. Hannah's voice carried genuine fear when she talked about threats to her children. For the first time since this conversation began, she seemed to be telling the truth about her motivations. Hannah, why didn't you just declare bankruptcy? Why not get help through legal channels? Because then Derek would have found out about everything. The gambling, the debts, the other stuff. I thought I could handle it privately and protect him from having to know. The other stuff. Hannah realized she had revealed more than she intended. Nothing. Just financial stuff. What financial stuff, Hannah? Betsy, I think this conversation is over. You're clearly working with the police, aren't you? She stood up abruptly, gathering her purse and coat. I should have known you would betray your own family. When Derek comes back and the kids ask why their aunt helped send their mother to prison, I hope you'll be proud of yourself. Derek isn't coming back, Hannah. He's filing for divorce and seeking full custody. The words hit her like a physical blow. She sank back into the booth, her face crumpling with genuine anguish. He can't take my babies away from me. They need their mother. They need a mother who doesn't steal from them and use their identities for fraud. I never hurt Tyler and Madison. Everything I did was to try to provide for them. You opened credit cards in Tyler's name. He's 12 years old, Hannah. She was crying now, the careful composure she had maintained throughout the conversation finally breaking down. I was going to fix all of it before anyone got hurt. I had a plan. What plan? Marcus had connections in Las Vegas, high-stakes poker games where I could have won back everything I owed and more. I just needed enough money to buy into the game. Hannah's plan revealed the depth of her self-delusion. She had been planning to use more stolen money to fund an even bigger gambling scheme, convinced that one lucky night could solve all her problems. Hannah, you need professional help, inpatient treatment for gambling addiction. I don't need treatment. I need my family to support me instead of abandoning me when I'm facing the worst crisis of my life. She stood up again, this time with finality. Betsy, if you testify against me, you're choosing strangers over your own sister. I will never forgive you for that. And if I don't testify, more elderly people will lose their life savings to people like you. Hannah stared at me with a mixture of hatred and disbelief, as if she couldn't comprehend how I could prioritize the welfare of her victims over her freedom. Was fine, but when Tyler and Madison grow up hating the aunt who destroyed their family, remember that you chose this. She walked away without looking back, leaving me sitting alone in the coffee shop with the weight of my family's complete destruction on my shoulders. But as I watched her disappear into the crowd on the sidewalk, I realized something important. I felt relief, not guilt. The conversation had confirmed what I had begun to suspect over the past few weeks. Hannah was not a victim of circumstances or a gambling addiction that had spiraled beyond her control. She was a calculating criminal who felt entitled to other people's money and genuinely believed she was the victim in every situation she had created. Agent Walsh would be pleased with the recording. Hannah had admitted to elder fraud, confirmed her association with a criminal network, and revealed the existence of loan sharks who might provide additional leads in the investigation. More importantly, I had finally heard Hannah speak, without the filter of family loyalty clouding my judgment. The sister I had been trying to save didn't exist. The woman I had just confronted was a stranger who happened to share my genetics and childhood memories. Derek had been right to file for divorce and seek full custody. Tyler and Madison deserved a chance to grow up with a father who would teach them that love means protection, not enablement. Hannah's trial began on a cold Tuesday morning in November, exactly 8 months after her arrest. I sat in the witness gallery, watching jury selection, amazed by how small and ordinary she looked at the defendant's table. The woman who had dominated my family's life with her chaos and manipulation appeared diminished in her orange jumpsuit, flanked by overworked public defenders. The prosecution team was led by Assistant U.S. Attorney David Kim, a methodical man who had spent months building an airtight case against Hannah and her criminal associates. During our preparation sessions, he had explained that Hannah's case would serve as a foundation for prosecuting the larger fraud network they had uncovered. Ms. Thompson, you were instrumental in exposing a criminal organization that had been operating for over 3 years. Attorney Kim had told me during one of our meetings, your sister's cooperation with Marcus Williams led us to 17 other fraud operators across 6 states. Marcus Williams, Hannah's mysterious associate, had turned out to be the leader of an elder fraud network that trained people like Hannah in manipulation techniques and helped them launder stolen money through cryptocurrency exchanges. The FBI had arrested him along with 16 other associates, all of whom were facing federal charges. Dr. Sarah Martinez, a forensic psychiatrist, testified about Hannah's psychological evaluation. Her findings were disturbing, but not surprising. The defendant exhibits classic narcissistic personality disorder with sociopathic tendencies, Dr. Martinez explained to the jury. She demonstrates a complete lack of empathy for her victims, an inability to accept responsibility for her actions, and a grandiose sense of entitlement to other people's resources. Dr. Martinez described how Hannah had manipulated psychological tests, attempting to fake symptoms of depression and anxiety to gain sympathy from evaluators. When confronted with evidence of her deception, Hannah had become angry and blamed the testing process for being biased against people who think outside conventional boundaries. In my professional opinion, the defendant poses a significant risk of reoffending if released. Dr. Martinez concluded, her psychological profile indicates a deeply ingrained pattern of exploitative behavior that is unlikely to change without intensive long-term intervention. Derek testified on the 3rd day of the trial. I watched from the gallery as he calmly and methodically described years of emotional and financial abuse that he had endured while trying to protect Tyler and Madison from their mother's increasingly erratic behavior. Hannah would disappear for 12 to 14 hours at a time, claiming she was visiting friends or running errands. Derek explained, I would later discover through credit card statements that she had been at casinos during these absences. The prosecutor showed Derek bank statements documenting the systematic depletion of their children's college funds, their retirement savings, and their emergency accounts. Did you authorize these withdrawals, Mr. Stevens? No, sir. I didn't even know they had occurred until our account balances reached zero. Derek's testimony was devastating because it came from someone who had loved Hannah and desperately wanted to believe in her capacity to change. His decision to leave her and seek custody wasn't vindictive, it was protective. Mr. Stevens, why did you ultimately decide to end your marriage? Derek looked across the courtroom at Hannah, who was staring at him with undisguised hatred. Because I realized that staying with my wife meant teaching my children that love means accepting abuse, that family means enabling destructive behavior, and that loyalty means sacrificing innocent people to protect someone who refuses to change. Mrs. Patterson testified next, her testimony particularly powerful because of her age and obvious vulnerability. At 83, she moved slowly to the witness stand, but spoke with clear authority about Hannah's manipulation tactics. As the defendant came to me crying, showing me hospital bills that looked very official, Mrs. Patterson explained, she said her husband was dying and they couldn't afford the surgery he needed to survive. The prosecutor displayed the fabricated medical documents Hannah had created to support her lies. They were sophisticated forgeries that would have fooled most people, especially elderly individuals who trusted their neighbors and wanted to help families in crisis. Mrs. Patterson, what impact did this crime have on your life? The elderly woman's voice shook slightly as she answered, I had to move out of my house and into a senior living facility because I could no longer afford to live independently. But worse than the money was, I don't trust people anymore. When my neighbors ask for help now, I can't tell if they're genuine or if they're like the defendant. Hannah's crimes had stolen more than Mrs. Patterson's savings. They had destroyed her faith in human goodness and her ability to participate in her community with open-hearted generosity. When my turn came to testify, I felt surprisingly calm. Agent Walsh had prepared me thoroughly, and I had practiced describing Hannah's crimes without becoming emotional or defensive. Ms. Thompson, what was your relationship with the defendant? Hannah is my older sister. We grew up together in the same household, and I had always looked up to her as someone who was confident and adventurous. Attorney Kim walked me through the timeline of Hannah's fraud against me, the unauthorized bank transfers, the credit cards opened in my name, the systematic theft of my identity over several months. Did you give the defendant permission to access your accounts or open credit cards in your name? No, I had no knowledge of these activities until I discovered them accidentally. The prosecutor showed the jury copies of forged credit applications bearing my signature. Hannah's handwriting analysis had confirmed that she had personally falsified every document. Ms. Thompson, what impact did these crimes have on your life? I looked at the jury and tried to convey the full scope of the damage Hannah had caused. She destroyed my credit rating, emptied my savings account, and put me nearly $50,000 in debt that I never authorized. But beyond the financial damage, she violated my trust in a way that has affected my ability to maintain relationships with other family members. Can you explain what you mean by that? My parents chose to enable Hannah's gambling addiction rather than protect me from her financial abuse. When I reported her crimes to police, they threatened to disown me for betraying family. I've had to choose between protecting myself and maintaining relationships with people who think family loyalty means accepting criminal behavior. Hannah's defense attorney, a tired-looking woman named Jennifer Blake, attempted to portray Hannah as a victim of gambling addiction who had made poor choices while suffering from mental illness. Ms. Thompson, isn't it true that your sister was struggling with a serious gambling addiction that impaired her judgment? Yes, Hannah had a gambling addiction, but she also had the capacity to plan and execute sophisticated fraud schemes over many months. She wasn't making impulsive decisions. She was running a criminal operation. Attorney Blake tried several times to suggest that I was motivated by personal vindictiveness rather than a desire for justice, but Attorney Kim's objections were consistently sustained. The evidence of Hannah's crimes was overwhelming and spoke for itself. The most damaging testimony came from Marcus Williams himself, who had agreed to cooperate with prosecutors in exchange for a reduced sentence. He described recruiting Hannah into the fraud network and training her in elder manipulation techniques. Hannah was one of our most successful operators, Williams testified. She had a natural talent for identifying vulnerable targets and crafting stories that would motivate them to provide financial assistance. Williams explained that the network had operated like a criminal business with quotas for each operator and sophisticated methods for laundering stolen funds through cryptocurrency and offshore accounts. What made Hannah particularly effective at elder fraud? She understood how to exploit family dynamics and social isolation. She would spend weeks building relationships with elderly targets before introducing any financial requests. By the time she asked for money, her victims felt like they were helping a close friend rather than a stranger. The coldly calculating nature of Hannah's approach was chilling to hear described in detail. She hadn't been a desperate gambling addict who had stumbled into crime. She had been a trained predator who specialized in exploiting vulnerable elderly people. After 2 weeks of testimony, the jury deliberated for less than 4 hours before returning guilty verdicts on all counts: elder fraud, identity theft, credit card fraud, bank fraud, and conspiracy to commit financial crimes. Hannah showed no emotion when the verdicts were read, staring straight ahead as if the proceedings were happening to someone else. Her complete lack of remorse, even in the face of overwhelming evidence and devastating victim testimony, confirmed Dr. Martinez's psychological assessment. Judge Rebecca Foster scheduled sentencing for 6 weeks later, giving the prosecution time to prepare victim impact statements and allowing the defense to submit mitigating evidence. But given the scope of Hannah's crimes and her leadership role in the fraud network, everyone expected a lengthy federal prison sentence. As we left the courthouse that afternoon, Derek approached me with Tyler and Madison, who had driven up from Colorado Springs to be present for the verdict. "Aunt Betsy." Madison ran toward me with 8-year-old enthusiasm, wrapping her arms around my waist. "Daddy says the bad people can't hurt anyone anymore." Tyler, now 13 and more, aware of the complexities involved, was more reserved. "Is Mom going to prison for a long time?" I knelt down to his level, trying to find age-appropriate words for a devastating reality. "Yes, Tyler, your mom made choices that hurt a lot of people, and now she has to face the consequences for those choices." "Is she ever going to get better?" Derek put his hand on his son's shoulder, and I could see the pain in his eyes as he watched his child grapple with the loss of the mother he had once idealized. "We hope so, buddy, but getting better is something your mom has to choose for herself. In the meantime, our job is to build a healthy, safe life for our family." As I watched Derek guide his children toward their car, I realized that the most important victory in this case wasn't Hannah's conviction. It was Tyler and Madison's chance to grow up with a father who would teach them that love means protection, that family means support rather than exploitation, and that some people's poor choices don't have to define everyone else's future. 6 months after Hannah's sentencing to 18 years in federal prison, I received an unexpected call that would transform my perspective on the entire ordeal. Representative Maria Gonzalez from the House Financial Services Committee was calling to invite me to testify before Congress about family financial fraud. "Ms. Thompson, your case has become a model for understanding how financial predators exploit family relationships," Representative Gonzalez explained. "We're drafting legislation to provide better protections for family members who become victims of financial abuse by relatives. The proposed Family Financial Protection Act would make it easier for victims to freeze accounts, clear fraudulent debt, and prosecute family members who commit identity theft. My testimony would help lawmakers understand the unique challenges of reporting crimes committed by people you love. The hardest part about family financial abuse is that victims often delay reporting because they hope the situation can be resolved privately. I explained to the congressional committee 2 weeks later. By the time most people realize they're dealing with a systematic criminal rather than someone making poor choices, significant damage has already been done. The hearing room was packed with advocates, law enforcement officials, and other victims of family financial fraud. I learned that my experience with Hannah, while extreme in scope, followed patterns that were increasingly common across the country. Dr. Jennifer Walsh from the National Center on Elder Abuse testified that family members commit nearly 60% of financial crimes against elderly victims and that these cases are significantly underreported because families prefer to handle them privately. Victims of family financial abuse face a unique dilemma, Dr. Walsh explained. Prosecuting the crime means potentially destroying family relationships, but not prosecuting means enabling continued victimization. Detective Sarah Chen, who had worked on Hannah's case, testified about the challenges law enforcement faces when investigating family financial crimes. Victims often refuse to cooperate with investigations because they hope the family member will voluntarily stop the criminal behavior, Detective Chen explained. This gives criminals like Hannah Stevens time to destroy evidence, intimidate additional victims, and expand their criminal operations. My testimony focused on the long-term impact of choosing to prosecute rather than enable criminal family members. 18 months after my sister's conviction, I can say definitively that protecting myself and her other victims was the right choice. I told the committee. My nephew and niece are thriving in a stable environment with their father, who has taught them that real love means protecting people from harm rather than protecting criminals from consequences. The committee was particularly interested in the role my parents had played in enabling Hannah's crimes and how that had affected my willingness to report her initially. Winter family loyalty can become a weapon that criminals use against their victims, I explained. My parents convinced me that reporting my sister would make me a bad family member, when in reality, not reporting her made me an enabler of elder abuse. After my testimony, I was approached by Amanda Mitchell, a lawyer who represented other victims of family financial fraud. She had founded a nonprofit organization called Family Fraud Recovery that helped victims navigate the legal and emotional challenges of prosecuting relatives. Your case has inspired dozens of other victims to come forward, Amanda told me. We've used your testimony as a template for helping families understand that prosecution isn't betrayal, it's protection. The organization had helped secure convictions against 43 family members who had committed financial crimes against relatives and had recovered over $2 million for victims through restitution programs. Would you be interested in joining our board of directors? Amanda asked. Your experience with systematic family fraud and elder abuse would be invaluable for developing our programs. I accepted the position, recognizing that my painful experience with Hannah could serve a larger purpose in protecting other families from similar exploitation. My personal recovery had been remarkable as well. The FBI's Financial Crimes Unit had helped me clear all fraudulent debt from my credit report, and a victim restitution fund had compensated me for most of my losses. More importantly, my credit score had recovered completely within a year, and I had been able to rebuild my savings. Jake and I had gotten engaged 6 months after Hannah's sentencing, and we were planning a small wedding for the following spring. His family had embraced me completely, providing the stable, supportive relationships I had lost when my parents chose to continue enabling Hannah even after her conviction. I'm proud of you for choosing integrity over false loyalty, Jake's mother had told me during a family dinner. Real families protect each other from harm, not from consequences. Derek had remarried a wonderful woman named Sarah who worked as a pediatric nurse and had embraced Tyler and Madison as if they were her own children. The kids were thriving in Colorado Springs, where Tyler had made the honor roll and Madison had joined a children's theater group. They rarely ask about Hannah anymore, Derek told me during one of our monthly phone calls. Tyler understands that his mother made choices that hurt people, and Madison just knows that mommy is away and that Sarah takes care of them now. Derek had also testified before the Congressional Committee describing how family members who enable financial abuse often become secondary victims themselves. I lost 15 years of my life making excuses for criminal behavior, Derek had explained to the lawmakers. I taught my children that loyalty meant accepting abuse, that love meant sacrificing innocent people to protect someone who refused to change. The most loving thing I ever did for my family was to stop enabling my wife's crimes. My parents had eventually reached out to apologize, though their contrition seemed motivated more by social isolation than genuine understanding of their role in enabling Hannah's criminal behavior. Everyone in town knows what Hannah did. Mom had explained during an awkward phone call. People ask us how we could have let it go on for so long. They had been forced to sell their house to pay off the second mortgage they had taken to fund Hannah's gambling and were now living in a small apartment near my aunt's family. The financial consequences of enabling Hannah had destroyed their retirement plans and left them dependent on family members who were understandably reluctant to provide support. We didn't know she was hurting so many people, Dad had said, though his explanation sounded rehearsed and hollow. I had chosen to maintain limited contact with them primarily to model for Tyler and Madison that forgiveness was possible, but that rebuilt relationships required genuine accountability rather than mere apologies. The most unexpected development had been a letter I received from Hannah herself, written from federal prison 8 months after her sentencing. For the first time in her adult life, she had taken responsibility for her actions without blaming others or making excuses. Betsy, I know you will probably never forgive me, and I don't expect you to, Hannah had written. I am writing this letter because my therapist says that genuine apologies acknowledge harm without asking for anything in return. The letter continued for 3 pages, detailing Hannah's recognition of the pain she had caused to her victims, her children, Derek, and me. She described the intensive therapy she was receiving for gambling addiction, personality disorders, and criminal thinking patterns. I understand now that I was not a victim of circumstances or mental illness, but a perpetrator who chose to hurt innocent people rather than face the consequences of my gambling addiction, she had written. I cannot undo the damage I caused, but I can commit to becoming someone who would never again choose to harm others for personal benefit. Hannah's letter also included a detailed accounting of her crimes against me, along with information about additional fraudulent accounts I hadn't discovered. She had provided this information to help me clear the remaining damage to my credit report. Tyler and Madison deserve a mother who models integrity, accountability, and respect for others. The letter concluded, I cannot be that person for them now, but I am working every day to become someone they could eventually be proud to know. They are lucky to have you and Derek as examples of what real love and family support look like. I had not responded to the letter, but I had shared it with Derek and my therapist. Both agreed that Hannah's words seemed genuine, though it would take years of consistent behavior change to determine if her transformation was real or simply another manipulation strategy. Recovery from narcissistic personality disorder is possible but rare, my therapist had explained. The prison environment and intensive therapy program may have created circumstances where Hannah was finally forced to confront reality rather than retreat into delusion. Whether Hannah's apparent transformation was authentic remained to be seen. But for the first time since this ordeal began, I felt hopeful that Tyler and Madison might someday be able to have a relationship with a mother who had learned to love them without harming others. Most importantly, I had learned that protecting innocent people from harm was more important than protecting harmful people from consequences. The Family Financial Protection Act had been signed into law, providing better resources for victims of family financial abuse. My testimony and advocacy work had helped create systems that would protect future victims from experiencing what I had endured. Jake and I had purchased a house in a quiet neighborhood near Derek's old workplace with a guest room specifically designed for Tyler and Madison's visits. They spent several weeks with us each summer, and I had the joy of watching them grow into confident, ethical young people who understood the difference between love and enablement. The most profound lesson from my experience with Hannah was that sometimes the most loving thing you can do for family is refuse to enable their destructive choices. Real love requires boundaries, and true family supports each other's growth rather than each other's dysfunction. 2 years after Hannah's conviction, I found myself standing in the kitchen of our new home, preparing Thanksgiving dinner for the family we had chosen to build from the ashes of the one that had been destroyed. Jake moved around me with practiced efficiency, mashing potatoes while I checked on the turkey that had been brining for 2 days. Aunt Betsy, can I help with the cranberry sauce?" Madison called from the dining room where she and Tyler were setting the table with Derek and Sarah's guidance. At 10 years old, Madison had grown into a confident, articulate child who loved cooking and had appointed herself my kitchen assistant during their visits. Tyler, now 14, had inherited his father's quiet thoughtfulness and had become protective of his little sister in ways that reminded me of the man Derek was becoming. "The cranberries are almost ready," I replied. "Come stir them so they don't stick." Madison appeared at my elbow, standing on the step stool Jake had built specifically for her height. As she stirred the bubbling cranberries, she chattered about her school play, her new friend Emma, and the kitten Derek and Sarah had adopted for the family. "Dad says we might move closer to Denver next year," Madison mentioned casually. "Sarah got offered a job at the Children's Hospital here." The possibility of having Tyler and Madison nearby filled me with excitement, though I tried to keep my reaction measured. Derek and Sarah were building their own family decisions, and I didn't want to influence them inappropriately. "How would you feel about moving?" I asked. "I'd miss my friends, but it would be cool to see you and Jake more often. Tyler says you could teach me to drive when I'm old enough." Jake laughed from across the kitchen. "I think we have a few years before we need to worry about driving lessons." The doorbell rang, and Tyler announced that Derek and Sarah had arrived with the side dishes they had prepared. Sarah swept into the kitchen, carrying a casserole dish of her famous sweet potato souffle, her face glowing with the particular happiness of someone who had found her place in a loving family. "How's the patient?" Sarah asked quietly, referring to her work with a young cancer patient whose case had been particularly challenging. Sarah's commitment to pediatric nursing had inspired me to volunteer with the Children's Advocacy Center, where I worked with young victims of financial abuse. My experience with family fraud had given me insight into the psychological impact on children who watch their parents commit crimes. "She's responding well to treatment," Sarah replied. "Her family is cautiously optimistic." Derek appeared behind his wife, carrying a bouquet of fall flowers and wearing the relaxed smile of a man who had found peace after years of chaos. The transformation in his demeanor was remarkable. The apologetic, shell-shocked person who had arrived at my apartment 3 years earlier had been replaced by a confident father and husband who radiated quiet strength. "Betsy, Jake, thank you for hosting again," Derek said, embracing both of us warmly. "The kids have been talking about this dinner for weeks." As we gathered around the dining table, I looked at the faces of the family we had created through intention rather than genetics. Derek and Sarah sat with their arms around Tyler and Madison, all 4 of them glowing with the security of stable, honest relationships. Jake squeezed my hand under the table, his engagement ring catching the light from the candles Madison had insisted on lighting. "Before we eat, I'd like to share what I'm grateful for this year." Derek began a tradition he had started after their second Thanksgiving in Colorado Springs. "I'm grateful for second chances," he continued, "for the opportunity to build a family based on honesty instead of fear, for children who are learning that love means protection rather than enablement, and for friends who showed me the difference between loyalty and justice. Sarah nodded in agreement. I'm grateful for the privilege of loving Tyler and Madison, for Derek's courage in protecting his children, and for the family that welcomed me with such generosity. Tyler, now old enough to articulate complex thoughts, spoke with the maturity of someone who had survived family trauma. I'm grateful that Dad taught me it's okay to love someone and still recognize when their behavior is wrong. And I'm grateful for Aunt Betsy, who showed us that protecting people is more important than protecting feelings. Madison, ever the optimist, beamed as she added, I'm grateful for cranberry sauce and Sarah's hugs, and that we don't have to worry about grown-up problems anymore. When my turn came, I felt overwhelmed by the abundance of genuine love and support surrounding me. I'm grateful for the courage to choose integrity over false loyalty for a partner who stayed present during the worst crisis of my life, and for the privilege of watching Tyler and Madison grow up knowing they are unconditionally loved by people who will never ask them to enable harmful behavior. Jake concluded our gratitude circle with characteristic thoughtfulness. I'm grateful for Betsy's strength in standing up for what was right, even when it cost her deeply, for the family that trusted me enough to include me in their healing, and for the reminder that real love sometimes requires difficult choices. As we began passing dishes around the table, Madison suddenly asked the question that had been hovering in all our minds, but that none of the adults had been willing to voice. Do you think Mom will ever get to have Thanksgiving dinner with a family again? The table grew quiet as Derek considered how to answer his daughter's question honestly, without burdening her with adult complexities. I hope so, sweetheart, Derek replied carefully. Your mom is working very hard in prison to become the kind of person who can have healthy relationships. Whether she succeeds depends on choices only she can make. Do you think she misses us? Sarah reached over to stroke Madison's hair with gentle affection. I'm sure she misses you and Tyler very much, but missing someone and being ready to be a good parent are different things. Tyler nodded with understanding beyond his years. Dad, when I'm grown up and have kids of my own, I'm going to make sure they never have to wonder if their mom or dad loves them more than money, or gambling, or anything else. Derek's eyes filled with tears of pride as he looked at his son. That's the most important promise anyone can make, buddy. The conversation moved to lighter topics as we enjoyed our meal, but I found myself reflecting on the journey that had brought us to this moment. 3 years earlier, I had been a single woman, living alone, desperately trying to save a family that was built on lies and manipulation. Now, I was surrounded by people who had chosen to build relationships based on honesty, mutual respect, and genuine care for each other's well-being. After dinner, as Jake and Derek loaded the dishwasher and Sarah helped the kids with homework, I stepped onto our back porch to call my parents. They answered together on speakerphone from their small apartment, their voices carrying the subdued tone of people who had lost most of their social connections due to their association with Hannah's crimes. Happy Thanksgiving, Mom and Dad. Yeah, happy Thanksgiving, honey. How was your dinner? Wonderful. Derek and Sarah are doing really well, and Tyler and Madison are thriving. There was a pause before Dad asked, Any word from Hannah? Hannah had been moved to a minimum security facility 6 months earlier after completing a rehabilitation program for financial crimes. Her letters had become more frequent, though I still chose not to respond to them directly. She's doing well in her programs, I replied diplomatically. She seems to be making genuine progress. We've been thinking about visiting her, Mom said hesitantly. My parents had not seen Hannah since her sentencing 2 years earlier. Their initial anger at her crimes had gradually been replaced by guilt about their role in enabling her behavior, and they seemed to be considering rebuilding some form of relationship with her. That's your choice to make, I said. Just remember that visiting someone in prison doesn't mean you have to go back to enabling their harmful behavior when they're released. We know, honey. We're lonely, and she's still our daughter. I understood their loneliness, though I also recognize the danger of their emotional need overwhelming their better judgment. Hannah's manipulation had been most effective when targeting people who felt isolated and desperate for connection. Here, Mom, Dad, have you considered joining that support group for families of people with gambling addictions? We've thought about it, Mom replied, but it feels strange to talk to strangers about family business. Their resistance to seeking support from people who understood their situation was part of the same thinking that had enabled Hannah's crimes for so long. They still viewed family dysfunction as a private matter rather than recognizing it as a pattern that could be changed with appropriate help. Family business that hurts innocent people becomes everyone's business, I said gently. Mrs. Patterson and the other elderly victims deserve better than having their suffering treated as a family secret. After ending the call, I returned to the warmth of our kitchen, where Tyler was showing Jake a science project he was working on, and Madison was reading a story to Sarah with animated voice acting. The contrast between the isolated sadness of my parents' lives and the connected joy of the family we had built was striking. Later that evening, after Derek's family had returned to their hotel and Jake was reading in bed beside me, I reflected on the unexpected gifts that had emerged from one of the darkest periods of my life. Hannah's crimes had destroyed my original family structure, but they had also revealed the difference between relationships based on obligation and relationships based on choice. Tyler and Madison would grow up understanding that love meant protection, that family meant support during difficult times, rather than enablement of harmful behavior, and that some people's poor choices didn't have to define everyone else's future. Derek had learned that protecting his children was more important than protecting his wife's feelings, and that genuine love sometimes required difficult decisions. Most importantly, I had discovered that choosing integrity over false loyalty, while painful in the short term, had created space for authentic relationships built on mutual respect and genuine care. As I drifted off to sleep beside the man who had chosen to stay present during my family's complete meltdown, I realized that Hannah's greatest crime had not been the money she had stolen or the elderly people she had defrauded. Her greatest crime had been teaching the people who loved her that family meant accepting abuse, that loyalty meant enabling destruction, and that love meant sacrificing innocent people to protect someone who refused to change. But her greatest unintended gift had been forcing all of us to choose between enabling her continued harm or protecting the people she was victimizing. In making that choice, we had discovered what real family actually looked like. 5 years after Hannah's conviction, I received a letter that would bring unexpected closure to the most difficult chapter of my life. It arrived on a Tuesday morning in March, written on standard prison stationery in Hannah's familiar handwriting, but the words contained within it were unlike anything she had ever written before. Dear Betsy, it began, I am writing to you not because I expect a response, but because my therapist believes that genuine accountability requires acknowledging harm without asking for forgiveness or reconciliation. The letter continued for 4 pages, detailing Hannah's recognition of the specific ways her crimes had damaged not just her immediate victims, but the entire network of relationships surrounding them. She described her understanding of how her manipulation had taught Tyler and Madison that love meant accepting harmful behavior, how her theft had violated Derek's trust in marriage, and how her lies had forced me to choose between family loyalty and protecting innocent people. I understand now that asking you to enable my destructive behavior was not asking for love, but asking you to become complicit in hurting innocent people, Hannah wrote. The most loving thing you ever did for me was refusing to participate in my crimes, even though it cost you relationships with our parents and caused you tremendous pain. Hannah described her work in the prison's intensive rehabilitation program, where she had spent 3 years in therapy for narcissistic personality disorder, gambling addiction, and criminal thinking patterns. She had completed a college degree in social work and was helping other inmates understand the impact of their crimes on victims' families. I have spent 5 years learning to feel genuine empathy for the people I hurt, she continued. Mrs. Patterson lost more than money. She lost her ability to trust others and help her community. Derek lost his faith in marriage and had to rebuild his entire understanding of what family means. Tyler and Madison lost their sense of safety and had to learn to love a mother while protecting themselves from her choices. The letter's most profound section addressed what Hannah had learned about the difference between love and enablement. Word. Real love requires boundaries, she wrote. Real family protects each other from harm, not from consequences. I taught everyone around me that loving me meant participating in hurting other people, and that was not love at all. It was emotional extortion. Hannah included detailed information about additional financial crimes she had committed that had never been discovered, along with documentation that would help remaining victims clear fraudulent debt from their credit reports. She also provided testimony that had helped prosecutors convict 3 other members of the fraud network who had previously escaped justice. Oh, I cannot undo the damage I caused, but I can commit to spending the rest of my life ensuring that my crimes result in some benefit for other victims, she concluded. I am working with federal prosecutors to develop educational programs that help families recognize financial abuse before it escalates to the level of systematic fraud. The letter ended with something I had never expected to receive from my sister, a genuine apology that took full responsibility without asking for anything in return. Betsy, I am sorry for teaching you that family meant accepting abuse. I am sorry for forcing you to choose between protecting me and protecting innocent people. I am sorry for stealing your money, violating your trust, and manipulating our parents into enabling my harmful behavior. You deserved a sister who supported your integrity, not one who punished you for having boundaries. I called Derek immediately after reading the letter, needing to share this development with someone who would understand its significance. It sounds different from her previous letters, Derek agreed after I read him excerpts, more focused on acknowledging harm than on explaining her motivations. Derek had received a similar letter 2 months earlier in which Hannah had apologized specifically for the emotional abuse she had inflicted during their marriage, and for teaching Tyler and Madison that manipulation was an acceptable way to handle conflict. What do you think changed? I asked. According to her last letter to me, she spent 8 months in solitary confinement after attacking another inmate who reminded her of Mrs. Patterson, Derek explained. Something about being forced to sit alone with her thoughts for that long broke through her ability to blame other people for her choices. Derek had not responded to Hannah's letter directly, but he had shared it with Tyler and Madison, who were now 16 and 12 years old respectively. Tyler had expressed cautious hope that their mother might eventually become someone they could have a relationship with, while Madison remained largely indifferent to Hannah's progress. Tyler asks about her sometimes, Derek continued, but Madison barely remembers living with her and she considers Sarah to be her real mom. I think she's protecting herself from getting emotionally invested in someone who hurt her when she was little. Sarah had legally adopted both children the previous year, giving them the psychological security of belonging to someone who had chosen to love them consistently. Derek's divorce from Hannah had been finalized while she was in prison, and he had remarried Sarah in a small ceremony attended by Tyler, Madison, Jake, and me. Are you going to respond to Hannah's letter? Derek asked. I had been wrestling with that question since finishing it. The letter seemed genuinely different from Hannah's previous communications, more focused on accountability than on self-pity, but I also remembered her history of sophisticated manipulation and her ability to adapt her approach when previous strategies failed. I think I'm going to write one letter back, I decided, not to rebuild a relationship, but to acknowledge her growth and let her know that Tyler and Madison are thriving. What would you tell her about the kids? that they're confident, ethical young people who understand the difference between love and enablement, that Tyler wants to become a therapist who helps families affected by addiction, and that Madison is interested in pediatric nursing like Sarah, that they have a stable home where honesty is valued and manipulation is not tolerated. Derek was quiet for a moment before responding. I think she needs to hear that. Part of her rehabilitation has to be understanding that her children are better off because we chose to protect them from her behavior rather than expose them to it. After hanging up with Derek, I called Jake at work to discuss Hannah's letter and my decision to respond to it. "What's your instinct telling you?" Jake asked, using the question he always posed when I was wrestling with difficult decisions. "That she's finally telling the truth, but that the truth doesn't change my boundaries," I replied. "I can acknowledge her growth without rebuilding a relationship that was built on manipulation." Jake had supported my decision to maintain no contact with Hannah throughout her imprisonment, understanding that my healing required distance from someone who had systematically violated my trust. But he also supported whatever choice I made about responding to this letter. "Your decision should be based on what's best for you, not what Hannah needs or what other people expect," he reminded me. That evening, I wrote a careful response to Hannah's letter, acknowledging her apparent growth while maintaining clear boundaries about future contact. "Hannah," I wrote, "your letter demonstrates a level of accountability and self-awareness that I have never seen from you before. If your transformation is genuine, I am glad for your sake and for the sake of future people you interact with." I described Tyler and Madison's development into confident, ethical young people who had learned to build relationships based on honesty rather than manipulation. I explained Derek's successful remarriage to Sarah and his growth into a father who modeled healthy boundaries and emotional security. "The family you left behind has healed and grown stronger through the process of learning to protect each other from harm rather than protect harmful people from consequences," I continued. "Tyler and Madison understand that loving someone does not mean enabling their destructive behavior, and they will carry that knowledge into their own adult relationships." I concluded the letter by acknowledging Hannah's crimes had inadvertently taught our entire family the difference between genuine love and emotional manipulation. "Your actions forced all of us to choose between enabling continued harm or protecting innocent people," I wrote. "In making that choice, we discovered what real family actually looks like. Real family supports each other's growth, protects each other from harm, and refuses to participate in hurting innocent people." I ended the letter with a statement that felt both firm and compassionate. "I hope your rehabilitation continues and that you are able to build a life that contributes positively to other people's well-being. However, I will not be rebuilding a personal relationship with you. The trust that was broken cannot be repaired, and my energy is better invested in the family relationships that are built on mutual respect and genuine care." After mailing the letter, I felt a profound sense of closure. For 5 years, I had wondered whether Hannah would ever take genuine responsibility for her crimes or continue blaming others for the consequences of her choices. Her letter suggested that prison and intensive therapy had finally forced her to confront reality rather than retreat into delusion. But more importantly, I realized that my healing had never actually depended on Hannah's accountability or transformation. It had depended on my own choice to prioritize protecting innocent people over protecting someone who chose to be harmful. 6 months later, Jake and I received an invitation that symbolized how much our chosen family had grown and strengthened. Tyler, now a senior in high school, had been accepted to college with a full scholarship to study psychology. Derek and Sarah were hosting a graduation party, and Tyler had specifically requested that Jake and I attend as the family members who had shown him that love means protection, not enablement. At the party, surrounded by Tyler's friends, teachers, and the extended family that had embraced him, I watched this remarkable young man give a speech about his plans to become a family therapist specializing in addiction and financial abuse. Whereas I want to help families learn the difference between supporting someone and enabling their harmful behavior. Tyler said, his voice strong with conviction. I want to help kids understand that they are not responsible for fixing their parents' problems, and that real love sometimes requires difficult boundaries. Tyler's chosen career path represented the ultimate transformation of Hannah's destructive legacy into something that would help other families avoid the trauma his own had endured. Her crimes had taught him lessons about integrity and boundaries that would benefit countless future clients. After the party, as Jake and I drove home through the Colorado mountains, I reflected on the profound life lesson that had emerged from the most painful period of my life. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do for family is refuse to enable their destructive choices. Real love requires boundaries, and true family supports each other's growth, not each other's dysfunction. Fighting back against manipulation isn't selfish. It's necessary for everyone's healing. Hannah's crimes had destroyed one version of our family, but they had also revealed the possibility of building relationships based on mutual respect, genuine care, and shared commitment to protecting each other from harm. The sister I had tried so desperately to save had never actually existed. The woman who had shared my childhood had become someone willing to hurt innocent people rather than face the consequences of her own choices. But in refusing to enable her destructive behavior, I had discovered what real family actually looked like. Tyler and Madison would grow up knowing they were unconditionally loved by people who would never ask them to participate in hurting others. Derek had learned that protecting his children was more important than protecting his wife's feelings. And I had learned that choosing integrity over false loyalty, while painful, had created space for authentic relationships built on honesty and mutual respect. The most profound irony was that saying no to Hannah's manipulation had been the most loving thing I could have done for everyone involved, including Hannah herself. By refusing to enable her crimes, I had forced her to face consequences that ultimately led to the rehabilitation she was experiencing in prison. Real love, I had learned, sometimes requires the courage to let people experience the full weight of their own choices, rather than cushioning them from reality. And real family means standing together to protect innocent people even when the person causing harm shares your DNA. As we pulled into our driveway past the garden Jake and I had planted together, and toward the home where Tyler and Madison would always be welcome, I realized that losing the family I had been born into had allowed me to build the family I had chosen. And that perhaps was the greatest gift Hannah's crimes had inadvertently given us all. What would you do if a family member's poor choices put innocent people at risk? Have you ever had to choose between family loyalty and protecting others from harm? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please like this video to help others who might be facing similar difficult family situations. Don't forget to subscribe for more stories about overcoming family challenges and building healthy relationships. And please share this video with anyone who might benefit from understanding the difference between love and enablement. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember that sometimes the most loving choice is also the most difficult one. Here's to choosing integrity, protecting innocent people, and building families based on genuine care rather than obligation.